right, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of Hawk Droppings. It's April 1st. It's about 9 p.m. on the West Coast. Happy April Fool's Day. I did get fooled by a couple of news stories today that I got very excited about before I learned that they were April Fool's jokes. I covered one of those in Coffee with Hawk today. First, I want to thank everybody for sticking around. I apologize for missing last week's episode. I've been pretty sick for about the last 12 days. And so thank you to everyone. I'm still getting over it, but I feel dramatically better than I had been. So thank you to everyone for sticking around, and thank you for all of your nice comments and words of encouragement and get better soon, Hawk messages. I really very much appreciate those. So today we're going to do White Christian Nationalism, episode 3. And the more I've been thinking about this, the more I think I'm just going to do. I mean, I've done this initial flurry of 3 episodes in a row, but I think I'm just going to continue to do at least like 1 episode a month on this stuff as things currently develop between now and the election. I covered a lot in the last 2 episodes, but I've just been reading so much more stuff, and I've read some really interesting interviews with people who've written books on the subject, people who, do focus groups and surveys with some of these folks, and then, just learning about some of the organizations that are out there right now that are trying to bring about a white Christian nationalist, authoritarian, theocratic government in the United States for the benefit of straight white Christian men. And it's like I read a lot of news, but I've really made an effort to go out and find some of this information. And I think that it's all, generally information that I don't think it's getting the coverage that it needs. I don't think generally this stuff is being taken as seriously as it should be. And it's like when you look at, the mission statements for some of these organizations and their stated goals about what they want to do, it is absolutely terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. It is deranged. It is completely detached from reality. But, a lot of these groups are extremely well organized and very, very well funded. And they're working hard every single day. They're working hard every single day. And in coordination with, the Heritage Project and the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025, they are waiting for Inauguration Day 2025 when Donald Trump gets sworn in for his second term and basically turns the entirety of the executive branch over to white Christian nationalists so that he can go play with the DOJ and the FBI and start prosecuting people he doesn't like. He's going to give the rest of the executive branch, every department, every agency, every cabinet position, and 50 to 75,000 employees within the executive branch. He's going to turn all that shit over to white Christian nationalists who want to do very, very bad things out of their need to dominate, control, exert power over people they don't like, who I'm learning generally are people who have a lot more fun in life than they do. I mean, there's so many of these secret little groups that are men only, and they meet behind closed doors and it's confidential, and, not that there's anything wrong with that, but come on, guys. So I heard a good interview with a woman named Katherine Stewart, who wrote a book recently. I haven't read it yet. I mean, my book list, I've added like 20 books to my book list that I need to order just in the research that I've been doing on white Christian nationalism over the last month or so. She wrote a book called The Power Worshippers. and which her book served as the inspiration for a Rob Reiner documentary that I think is out right now. It was released a couple of weeks ago, called God and Country, and it's about this white Christian nationalist movement. And I've heard a couple of interviews with Rob Reiner about it, and he's like, the documentary is not anti-Christian at all. It's defending Christianity against these people who are not Christian. And at the beginning of one of these interviews, Katherine Stewart talks about how she views the definition of this current version of white Christian nationalism that we're living with. And she said, Christian nationalism is not a religion. It's not Christianity. It's got nothing to do with Christianity. It is a political phenomenon that involves the exploitation of religion for political gain. It's basically the idea that America was founded as a so-called Christian nation for white Europeans, and that our laws should be based on the Bible. But this ideology is really a tool for a leadership-driven political machine that turns that sort of mythology into political power. It is a deeply, deeply anti-democratic movement. And the key to understanding this movement is to recognize that it's both leadership driven. It's not so White. Her one point that she makes is that, it's like there's not this groundswell throughout the nation at the grassroots level for white Christian nationalism. It's these kind of well-funded, educated elites at the top, who are creating this stuff, and then the Gomers buy into it because they sell it to them. They sell them on these ideas. And they create these organizations. It's organization driven. And then they go out and start recruiting members, and it's propaganda. And because these groups are very well funded, they have these very sophisticated data tools and propaganda machines. And the amazing part is that in forming these organizations and putting out these materials and recruiting members and all this stuff and spending all of the money that they're doing and raising all of the money that they're raising, all of it is tax exempt because it's under the umbrella of religion. Everything they do is tax exempt. And most of it is tax deductible as well. So it's amazing. And it's a top-down structure. It's not about partisan politics. It's, if you ask them about it, they're like, well, it's about values. It's about American Christian values. And, but when you talk more to them, and I'm going to talk about another article right after this by a couple of guys who did surveys. They went out and did like surveys and focus groups of a lot of these people. It's like you're talking about power and control, and this idea that God created the United States of America as a place for white Europeans. I mean, let alone Native Americans, First Nations populations. We're here for thousands of years before the first white European ever set foot on the continental United States. And there were something like 140 or 160 million of those folks in the United States of America when Christopher Columbus sets foot in the Bahamas or wherever it was in 1492. He never even landed on North America, the lower 48 states. But so it's about power, connection, networking, money, funding. And when Donald Trump was running, speaking in kind of practical terms, when Donald Trump was running in 2016, it became very apparent to him very early in that campaign that evangelicals liked what he was selling. They liked it. They're like, yes, strong borders, white Christian nation, shut down the southern border, deport people who don't speak English, who don't belong here. They took our jabs, and and that's why he picked Mike Pence to be his running mate the first time around, because Mike Pence was his conduit to that segment of American society. Because Mike Pence was a very devout evangelical, Christian man from the Midwest, the state of Indiana, where he was formerly governor, and under whose watch he allowed an HIV epidemic to resurge, in the 2010s, because, of course, why not? Because Jesus told him to do that, I guess. I don't know. But they all hate the same people, and they all love each other because they all hate the same people that each other hate. And I mean, could you imagine if the entire population of the United States of America was people like Mike Pence? How much that would suck, and how boring it would be. I imagine that's a lot what heaven's like. I mean, it's like, I get comments on my TikTok page all the time. People are like, "Oh, you're not getting into heaven with this attitude," and I'm like, "Well, who's going to be there? People like you?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, you're going to need to work on that sales pitch a little bit." But but Donald Trump understood this very, very early on, and he made one of his chief spiritual advisors, this woman named Paula White. And boy, I learned way more about Paula White than I ever wanted to during Donald Trump's presidency. I mean, she's like one of these megachurch folks. And I remember one speech that she gave where she was just like, wherever I'm standing, God is using me as a conduit, and God flows out of me around everyone. God's power flows out to fill whatever room I'm in. And first I was just sitting there thinking, I was like, do you think God needs you to do that? If God is real, I mean, couldn't God just do that? He's sitting up there. He's like, I need a conduit, but I need a conduit to get into that room. Hey, can somebody get me into that room? I need a conduit. I mean, it's just, it's a level of absurdity that I'm just not used to dealing with. And then I found out that Paula White's husband is a guy named Jonathan Cain. He's the keyboardist for Journey, the rock band Journey. It's like the first song that he and Steve Perry wrote together in like 1979 or 1980 was Open Arms. And that's Paula White's husband. And like a couple of the other guys in Journey, along with Jonathan White, are on board with her deal, including their new singer from the Philippines. And so it's like the three of them go to the White House to do this thing during Donald Trump's time in office, and that pissed off, the only founding member that's left, Neil Schon, the guitar player. And they had this big, brouhaha within the band about, hey, can you guys ease up on the white Christian nationalism shit? It's just, but Trump being transactional, and, white Christian nationalists are transactional too. It's like they supported Trump because of what he could give them. And he gave them shit in exchange for their support. He gave them access to the judges and justices that they wanted on the courts. He gave them access to public money and policies that they wanted, and he gave them unprecedented power and political access while he was in office. And and they wanted, the things that they appreciated about Trump was that he would play ball with them. They knew, it's like they refer to him They refer to Donald Trump as an imperfect vessel. Well, sometimes God chooses an imperfect vessel, for his messengers. I mean, I think describing Donald Trump as an imperfect vessel is being incredibly charitable, frankly. Um, I mean, he's a tornado of sin and immorality and gluttony and adultery and lying and stealing and thieving and dishonesty, or, as they would call it, an imperfect vessel. And, because I just remember when Trump would go to speak at, places like Liberty University, and he's like, 2 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. I mean, come on now, 2 Corinthians. And everybody in the crowd is just like, whatever. We know he's totally full of shit and he's a pervert and cheats on all his wives, but whatever. He's in office and he's going to give us what we want. So this is fine. We don't give a shit. And it's just, everything about it is just so gross. And it's like I think I can't remember if it was the first or second episode that I did on this, where it's like, I always try to understand why. Like, why are these people so goddamn obsessed with controlling the lives of other people? Controlling who people love, controlling who people can marry, controlling women's bodies, controlling what women are allowed to do, where they're allowed to go, whether or not they're allowed to travel from one state to the other, controlling the LGBTQ community, and just punishing everybody who's not like them. And it's like, yeah, you get issues of, like a dominant personality disorder and narcissism and insecurity and stuff like that. But it's like, you think about a lot of the people who are funding these things, people who are multi-millionaires and billionaires, who can literally go live whatever life they want to live and do anything that they want to do. And they have decided that this is what they want to do. And I know it's like, we're dealing with a certain level of irrationality and delusion whenever you're talking about somebody, whose life perspective is, well, Jesus told me to bring theocracy to the United States of America. You're like, oh, okay, that's cool. I mean, it's like, what? Huh? So, okay, that sounds totally reasonable. But it's like, I mean, the conservative Christian movement, it's like it really got going. Well, I mean, it really got going in the late 50s, in the early 60s, in response to Brown versus Board of Education. I talked about this in one of the other episodes. The Supreme Court saying that schools could not be segregated, including private religious schools. And that's when you started seeing Christians become much more politically active in this country, because God damn it, they wanted their segregated schools. They did not want their little white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed kids going to school with black people and black kids. And that really got the ball rolling. And then you had the Voting Rights Act in 1964, you had the Civil Rights Act in 1965, and Roe versus Wade in 1973. And then by the late 1970s, we were off to the races with Jerry Falwell and Billy Graham. And then in 1980, their organizations were formalized, and they wedded themselves to the Republican Party for the candidacy of one Ronald Reagan to become president of the United States, the moral majority. And, it always cracked me up, that name, the moral majority, because I used to see people in Central Ohio wearing little buttons that said moral majority. And even back then, I was just like, yeah, you know how you spot somebody who's a total fucking pervert if they're wearing a button that says moral majority, uh, you know, because they're covering up something. They're covering up something, and so it started. It's amazing that the conservative Christian movement in the United States of America started because they were upset about desegregation in the 50s. And another thing that, which I mean, I guess my answer to this question is in Katherine Stewart's definition. It's not about religion. It's not about Christianity. It has nothing to do with Christianity. But you get these people who so loudly and consistently and continuously proclaim their Christianity when every single goddamn thing about their life and their policies and their views and what they say out loud and their actions goes 100% against the teachings of Jesus Christ, which I guess gives them more in common with Donald Trump than I had previously recognized, because he does the same thing just in a different way. And over the last decade, this movement has become much more, again, racially segregated, and we've moved from Christian nationalism to white Christian nationalism, and that's where we're at today. And it's become pretty explicitly racist, and at a minimum, very, very racially exclusive. And there was another interview that I found. Was in New York Magazine. They have this like sub page on their website called Intelligencer, and there are usually some really, really great articles on there. And one of their senior writers, a woman named Sarah Jones, she interviewed two guys named Philip Gorski and Samuel Perry, who recently put out a book called The Flag and the Cross. And one of the things that they did that I thought was really interesting, they would have Christians fill out surveys, with questions that they had asked. And they were very in depth, and they had, white Christians fill this stuff out. People who, openly proclaim themselves to be white Christian nationalists to fill these surveys out. And they also have Black Americans who are Christians to fill these things out. And one of the most interesting things that they discovered is when you talk about the concept of the United States of America being a Christian nation, the white Christians very much looked backwards to the 50s and before. It was nostalgia, it was Christian values in government, and it was authoritarianism, and it was like controlling problem populations and keeping people down and keeping people in their place and making sure they knew their place. And when they would get these survey results from Black Americans who were Christians, their version of the United States being a Christian nation based on Christian values looked forward into the future. Their views were very aspirational. Their views were very, these Christian tenets combined with the United States of America are ideals that we have to strive to live up to, that we have to move forward and continue to improve as a nation to live up to these ideals. Whereas white Republicans wanted to go back to 1952 when those people couldn't vote. I found that to be a pretty fascinating difference in the work that these guys did in the data that they collected. And again, it's like it's a political vision that privileges straight white Christian men with power to control the government and to control every population or demographic within the United States that's not exactly like them, even the ones they're married to. it's it, it's just mind blowing, man. It's mind blowing. Um, and they came up, based on some of the survey responses that they got and some of the data that they collected. They came up with these little groupings and these shared characteristics among white Christian nationalists in the United States. And one thing they came up with that was kind of the holy trinity of white Christian nationalists in the United States: freedom, order, and violence. And which means kind of a libertarian freedom for people like them and order for everyone else. So it's like this group gets freedom, everybody else gets order. And that reminded me of, I can't remember the name of the person who came up with this thing, but it's something that I've quoted many, 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 many times. That these kinds of people, they want to be protected by the law, but not bound by the law. And they think that everyone who's not like them should be bound by the law, but not protected by the law. Meaning that those people are open. And it really comes down to, deciding who within the United States of America has permission to use or who has access to violence. Who gets to use violence in the United States, and against whom do they get to use it? And that's what that entire thing of being protected by the law but not bound by the law versus being bound by the law but not protected by the law is, it all comes down to violence. And that's how all of this shit gets completely wedded to gun rights in the United States. God, guns, and guts. And because in 2024, white Christian nationalists view their access to violence as flowing directly through their gun rights, which are in the Bill of Rights, which they will consistently and constantly tell you those rights come from God, not from man. And so it's like all of this stuff gets wrapped up, and it's all based on history, and a wrong version of history, but a rewriting of history that places, straight white Christian men at the center of the history of what geographically became the United States of America, over the last 250 years. Again, completely ignoring the fact that other very, very large populations lived here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years before any European settler ever set foot on what would become the lower 48 states. And one of the guys in this interview, Gorski, made an interesting point. He's like, that's why you saw these white Christian evangelicals get so fucking bent about things like the 1619 Project, because the 1619 Project was like, oh, actually, African slaves were here before you guys were here. They were here before you. And so their descendants have been here longer than you have. And it takes the white, straight Christian European settlers out of the center of the story. And they can't have that, because that mixes everything up as it relates to God giving white European Christian settlers the United States to form a Christian nation. And, not only do they rewrite history or reframe history, one of these guys talks about how, he buys a lot of books that are published by people on the right. And he has the Founders Bible. He has the Patriots Bible for teenagers. He has the Patriots Bible for women. Then he's like, actually, I have several Patriots Bibles. And it's just centering white Christian Americans within the story, and rewriting our history, that this nation was founded on Christian values by Christian people for Christian people. And, that just completely ignores the actual documented history that our founding fathers were deists. They were not theists. Deists believe in a creator, and that's kind of the end of their belief of God. God created the heaven and earth, period. Whereas theists will take it a step further and say, yes, God created the heaven and the earth, but he also watches you 24/7, and he gets very upset when you masturbate. That kind of North Korean surveillance state version of God, i.e. Christianity. Um, but so, and it's like, these white Christian nationalists are trying to rewrite themselves into this version of history as though they are modern day founding fathers and modern day revolutionary soldiers, fighting against the demonic hedonistic hordes of black and brown people in the LGBTQ community and all these trashy women that are going out and having 9 abortions a month, because they've got to take America back for God. Um, and another thing, it's just like the crazy thing is it's like they're so anti-socialist and pro-capitalist. Again, completely anti Jesus Christ, completely anti Jesus Christ. And and they talk, a lot of these folks talk about righteous violence and male violence and the worship of gun culture. And they clearly believe that within the political and legal framework of the United States of America, they believe that straight white Christian men should have access to violence through their gun rights, and specifically violence against quote unquote other populations within the United States. And that's one of the scariest parts. They think that they are ordained by God to commit violence on behalf of a Christian nation. And it's just like, how fucking warped does your brain have to be? How warped does your brain have to be? And there was one group that I read about that very, very explicitly talks about securing the future of the United States as a Christian nation for its Christian citizens. And I immediately was like, oh, that's the 14 words. That's the 14 words. That's the modern version of the 14 words, just like DEI and CRT are the current modern versions of the N word. Securing the future of the United States for Christian Americans is the new version of the 14 words. What is the 14 words? It's something I've talked about on TikTok before, and something that I've talked about in some of my podcasts. The 14 words are the following: we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. That slogan was coined by a guy named David Lane, who was a member of the white supremacist terrorist group known as the Order, that was very active in the United States in the 70s and the 80s. They robbed banks and they murdered people. The phrase reflects the primary white supremacist worldview in the late 20th and 21st centuries, that unless immediate action is taken, the white race is doomed to extinction by an alleged, quote, rising tide of color, unquote, purportedly controlled and manipulated by the Jews, which is now referred to by people like Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Charlie Kirk, and Sean Hannity as replacement theory. So they have taken the 14 words and turned that into replacement theory, that the cabal of Jews is bringing in black and brown immigrants into the United States to replace white people. and do away with straight white Christian culture for some reason. I don't know, because I mean, what's more fun than straight white Christian culture? Oh, there's so many jokes I could make right now. And but it's like they clearly have this hierarchical belief, and you'll hear him say things like real American. you know I'm a straight white Christian man from a rural area, and that makes me a real American. I'm a real American. You know, unlike some brown kid who's in college in Manhattan whose parents were immigrants and came here from overseas. They don't view someone like that as a real American, even though that person was born here and raised here. They are real Americans. And that's at the root of, because the next step to that is when you hear these chowderheads that are the ones who are say we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic. And you think about this, you think about the 14 words, you think about this hierarchy that they view with them at the top and everyone else beneath them, and they apply that to politics, and we're not a democracy, we're a republic, which translates to voting rights. Because when someone says to you we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, what they are saying to you is several things. First of all, they're telling you that they're racist. Second of all, they're telling you that they don't understand the definition of the word democracy. Constitutional republic is a form of democracy. It is representative democracy. In democracies, people vote. In a direct democracy, every single person votes on every single thing. And, that's kind of the mob rule thing. Well, we in this country decided to go with a representative democracy where we vote to elect representatives who then go to local governments, state governments, Washington, D.C., and they vote on every single little thing. But it's absolutely a form of democracy. And, it's like somebody who says we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic is really the equivalent of somebody looking at you and saying, I don't have a dog, I have a German Shepherd. Or I don't have a pickup truck, I have a Ford F-150. That's how stupid they sound. And they don't see it, they don't understand it, they don't care. Because what they are telling you is that not everyone should vote, and some people's votes should count more than others. And the current candidate for governor, the Republican candidate for governor in South Carolina, Mark Robinson, is on tape. He's on video saying that he does not believe that women should be allowed to vote. And he wants to go back to a time when women did not have the right to vote. And Republicans across the country, and Democrats do gerrymandering too, but Republican gerrymandering is explicitly racially motivated, period, 100%, full stop. And they got a big boost in some of their state election laws from Chief Justice Roberts. I think it was back in 2013 with an opinion that he wrote gutting the Voting Rights Act. And states' abilities to pass racially discriminatory voting restrictions. And Republicans have pioneered that and have gotten very, very good at it. But, part of white Christian nationalism today in 2024 is, so much of it is embodied in that statement. We are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic, because they are explicitly telling you that the votes of straight white Christian men should count more than the votes of Black people, the votes of brown people, the LGBTQ community, and women shouldn't be able to vote at all. That is explicitly what they are telling you when they say that to you. Because those people aren't real Americans. And, so you see very strong support in white Christian nationalist communities for gerrymandering and obviously for the Electoral College, which the Electoral College is also incredibly racist and comes from slave history, period. Um, it's amazing. I mean, yeah, I'll talk about that for a second because I'm running out of time, and I got through one of the 6 things. No, I got through 2, I guess. I got through 2 of the 6 things that I had printed out. Okay, so how did the Electoral College come about? It was during slavery, when slavery was still legal. There were more people living in the North than there were living in the South. There were dramatically more white people living in the North than there were living in the South. And so because we had a representative democracy, well, the levels of representation were based on population numbers. And so the Electoral College appeased the Southern states by, for purposes of representation in Congress, counting their slave populations while not giving those slave populations the right to vote. So the numbers would be counted, but their votes, it was illegal for them to vote. So they were counted in the representative democracy, but they were not represented, nor were they legally permitted to participate in the democracy. That's the Electoral College that we still have today, that has elected the last 3 Republican presidents, I think. I don't think a Republican presidential candidate has won the Republic. George Bush, 2004. That's one time that a Republican candidate for president has won the popular vote since his dad was president in 1988. That's the Electoral College for you right there. And white Christian nationalists absolutely love the Electoral College, which elected Donald Trump in 2016. All right. We're going to wrap it up on that. And as I said, I'm going to keep doing these episodes on white Christian nationalism. So I guess I'm going to save these articles over here somewhere until I do my next one. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And thanks for sticking around with me while I've been sick. It's been extremely unpleasant. I don't know what this bug is that's going around, but it lingers and it sucks. And it's like a roller coaster, man. It's like, I think I'm better. Like the first half of today, I felt like $1 million, and then it just kind of came rushing back again. And I've had a few evenings where it's like, I feel great. I feel amazing. And then while I'm sleeping, it just comes back and beats me over the head. So, but, as always, please go to hawkpodcasts.com and check out our other podcasts. We put out 5 episodes every week. Although last week I think I only did 4 because I was sick. Excuse me. And hawkmerchstore.com for all of your Hawk merch needs. We're working on a line of stuff for summer right now. So we want to get some new stuff up there. So if you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments for summertime Hawk merch. And as always, a huge shout out to my brother for his help with all of this stuff. Without him, this wouldn't exist. You guys wouldn't be seeing anything at all. And thank you to our buddy Wiseacre for his amazing graphics. And thank you to my brother from another mother, my buddy Anu, for letting us use his music. So it's Monday. It's April Fool's Day. It's the beginning of the week. I hope everybody has a safe and productive and fun week. And, shit's going to get crazy. 2 weeks from today, Donald Trump's criminal trial starts. Shit's going to get crazy. It's going to get bumpy. So everybody do what you can to take care of your mental health and regulate your nervous system, man, because it's going to get rough. All right. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. And I will see you soon.